I'm excited to be live with Darren today. He's an awesome builder. And until recently, my whole experience with builders was grand designs, where everything is over budget and over time. But Darren assures me that there are ways to avoid that. And it's all about selecting the right builder. So today, Darren's going to share with us around how to select the right builder. So before we get stuck into it, Darren, tell us a little bit about the building and what you love about supporting people to build things.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Carmen, for me, I've always kind of been involved in the building construction space ever since, pretty much 16, on the tools, digging trenches and whatnot. So I've always found it's just satisfying to see the project go from literally like sketch plans to physically building it brick by brick and then seeing it being built. And then, of course, delivering that project to the clients. I mean, that's the most satisfying part for me.
Yeah, beautiful. And so you've done the hands-on work, and since then you've also got some qualifications in this area as well. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I started doing my bachelor's in architecture first at
Yeah.
UTS, and once I finished that, and then I went back and did my certificate 4 in building construction, just to get a bit of the sense of the design aspect of the building, and as well as the hands-on practicality of building construction. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I love how you've got the architect point of view as well, because I know that you love working with really awesome architects as well. So we had a bit of a chat the other day, and Darren, you were very honest with me and actually told me what your margins were in the context of understanding numbers. So let's get stuck into it, shall we? So understanding numbers. So when someone you ask some builders to go give you a quote and you get the numbers back, what are the key things to look at when understanding what it actually means?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things that a lot of people find it to be a bit taboo to talk about.
That's why I want to talk about it.
But I think it's important to know, like, you really want your builder to be making a margin, because only if the builder is making a margin and they've budgeted for, making a margin, will then there be no variations on the job. Because what we see a lot of times is, builders trying to submit a lower price to the competition to win the contract, and of course, when things start to get built, the variations just start pouring in, and the next thing the budget's completely been blown. And that just comes down to comparing the numbers. So anytime when you're looking at getting a tender from typically 3 to 4 builders, and you're looking at your quotes, trying to get a sense of why is this guy higher or lower, there really shouldn't be any big discrepancies of even more than 5%. Because what you'll find in most projects is the typical builder margin you're probably looking at, and it just depends when we're talking about net profit margin or we're talking about just a growth, like a gross overhead margin. So anything that's going to be over 5%, especially when it's a 10% numbers discrepancy, that should be a big red flag to say that, hold on, there's definitely something that's being left out. Because I can guarantee you the builder that's 10% lower, or the builders that charging 10% higher, they're not trying to make a 10% extra margin compared to the next bloke. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is that when you get some quotes back and one is more than 10% or 10% or more less expensive, or at least initially, than the other person, it should actually put some red flags up. So one of the things that you just shared with us is what that can mean sometimes is that a person, the builder might then submit variations and increase the cost once they've secured the contract. But the other thing you also shared with me the other day was like the on-site supervisor. So tell me a little bit about that and how that works in terms of understanding the numbers.
Yeah, sure. So it really comes down to how the builder is going to manage your project. If you were to just, for example, go on to Seek, literally just have a quick search, type in site manager or project manager, you'll find that the average salary that they will get in a year, you're probably looking at around 150,000, give or take, around that range.
Yeah.
So you can put yourself in a position of, when you're looking to build your new home, knowing that your house is going to take over a year to build, ideally, I would imagine most people want to have a builder on site that's going to supervise the job all the day, like every day, throughout the process for that 1 year period. So
Yeah.
in which case you have to factor in that the supervision fees that's going to be involved is at least going to be 150,000 plus, of course, the company is going to be margins and overheads that's going to be added onto that figure. So
Yeah.
keeping that in mind, you have to be able to grasp like how much you're looking at the preliminary costs, the supervisor fees, admin fees, and we're not even considering contract admin costs, project manager, site manager, labor. So those numbers, I think some people tend to overlook, and then that's
Mm.
because in their mind they might not necessarily know what the market value is for project managers and site managers. So it's
Yeah.
just important to get an understanding of that figure. And if you're looking to have a builder or have a site manager that's going to be responsible for your job full time, instead of just rocking up to site a couple of hours and clocking off and leaving a trace to do what it
Mm.
want, then you really have to budget that into your project ultimately.
Yeah, beautiful. And so what I understand is that if you get a quote that's significantly cheaper, there could be a couple of things at play. One is the potential for variations in the future. The other one is that maybe there is an on-site project manager factored in.
That's right.
And I'm assuming that not having an on-site project manager could result in all sorts of things. So tell me, what's a disaster story from not having an on-site manager?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just funny you ask because what will happen is if you leave the trades to do what they want on site without a builder or site manager on site to really supervise, things that get built often at times will be different to what's being drawn because each trade sometimes will have the tendency to build however they've built all the years, and they might completely ignore the architect's design intention for that particular project. So that's when having a full-time builder on site is going to be really important to make sure that your project's being built, to drawings, to specifications.
Yeah, beautiful. And so if you've gone, you're building, your dreams and desires, and you've got this architect to create this beautiful thing, and then if it's just built wrong, like I could imagine that would be really painful. So when you get your quote back, obviously look at the numbers, look at the differences. Any big differences, it sounds like you should stop and think about what, ask questions. Is there going to be a person
That's
on
right.
site? How does this work? Are they just going to randomly rock up when they feel like it a couple of times a week, and things like that? So they're really good questions to ask. And also I love like the 10% range, because you want to be you want the people that you engage, either your builders or anyone else you engage, to be making money, because it has to be a win-win situation.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so I love that. So anything else that we should be aware of with the numbers before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the numbers about looking at the cost discrepancy, one thing you can try to eliminate is having a detailed scope of work in terms of what's going to be involved, and checking through the scope of work to make sure all builders have accounted for everything that needs to
Yeah.
be accounted on the project. Too many times we see clients trying to get a costing just purely based on some DA stamp drawings, and there's no specifications involved. So you can't really compare apples to apples in that sense if all you're giving them is just some plans with no actual specifications or details.
Yeah. And so forgive my ignorance, but the specifications, who does that? Is that the architect?
That would be the architect. That's right, and
Yeah.
that's why it's important to get an architect on board during that process.
Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. So they're the numbers. So the next thing to really have a look at is, you've got the numbers and you're comparing them, but how well the builder treats their subcontractors. So tell me about this.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things. It's a bit of I guess a hidden tip if you like. So one really good way to judge the builder, not just based on their reputation or testimonials, which, as we all know, sometimes testimonials might not necessarily be accurate, is to see how they treat the subcontractor team. So if a builder has subbies that they've worked with, especially for many years, then you can get a real sense of how, I guess, how not just how well grounded they are, but how well they treat the team is going to be a reflection of how well they're going to be to communicate with and to work with. A builder that has a well organized site, what that will do for the subbies is that obviously the subcontractors are going to treat each other with respect. There's going to be
Yeah.
minimum conflicts. And just one other thing to be aware of is be especially aware of some builders who actually do not pay the subbies, because I've heard from other people, from other subbies that we've worked with, is that sometimes they don't get paid by builders, and these are the builders that typically will submit a lower cost when they tender, and that the reason is that they're just not paying its subbies. So that's a really big thing to just be aware of.
That's horrendous. We were interviewing a virtual assistant the other day to see if they were going to be a member of our team, and we said, "What was the worst thing about your last job?" And she very diplomatically said, "They didn't pay me." So I think just that's horrible, and I respect potential clients who say, "How do you treat your VAs? You know, is it all ethical? Is it, you know?" And so I really respect people who ask those questions. So I'd imagine it'd be great to ask those questions to your builders as well. So then tell me about the company background. You know, what do you look for in this?
So it really comes down to the complexity of the project you're kind of going for. But one thing to just raise up is just ask about the builder in terms of their level of background education in building construction. So typically the norm is that, you know, there's builders of two separate paths that you take. You know, the path A is you're coming from a trades background, whether that's in carpentry or bricklayer. So you're going from that route, and then you're getting a builder's license through that way. The other one is you're going through from a kind of university background, focusing more on the project management side, really understanding perhaps the design or the engineering element to building construction. So it's just important, you know, with your project that you're looking at in terms of determining what is the builder that, you know, what is their complexity or their understanding of building construction. Because depending on the scale of projects you work with, anything that's probably, I would say, over maybe 2 or 3 million, you're probably more wanting to look and have a builder that's going to have a deeper understanding of building construction, coming from that engineering, architectural, or, you know, from that QS background. So they have a deeper grasp of the building.
So you've dug trenches. So you've like actually been on site and done the hard yakka. You also have studied architecture, but I believe your business partner's also studied something pretty cool. So tell me about his background.
Yeah, so with one of our company directors, he's got a background in engineering, and he is particularly in steel. So he actually, before he came, he actually was involved with structural steel works for engineering, but for submarines. Like it's a completely different beast of its own. So super complex stuff he was working with. And now he's just working on, you know, simpler, as he like to say, steel stuff. And, you know, the company, you know, started by my father, Winston, and he's obviously got engineering background as well as a quantity surveying background. So that really helps us to get a really good grasp on construction estimate in terms of quantifying building material and labor costs to get an accurate sense of what a project's going to cost ultimately.
Yeah, beautiful. So what I'm hearing is some companies, their backgrounds might be quite narrow, and so it's actually worthwhile asking and exploring and you know, having a broad background. It sounds like there'll be a lot of advantages because you could anticipate potential pitfalls. Even at the quoting stage, I'm imagining you guys might see stuff that other people might not see as potential, you know, problems or things. So have you got an example where you've looked at something and you're like, guys, you haven't thought about this?
Yeah, yeah. We've come up with a few interesting ones. One of them was in Lane Cove. It was like a townhouse kind of development, and what they wanted to do was that the developer had a really good idea in mind. Is they wanted to use this system called speed floor, and what that basically it requires is you have these. Without getting too technical, but you have to imagine what it does is you've got these structure that will have a prefab kind of hole, like opening, and the opening of that diameter can go up to 250 millimeters in diameter, let's say, which is all fine. You can pass pipes through, and that's fine. But the problem is with that project, for you to use that system on that basement level, you have to account for the natural fall, like a slope for the sewer lines. And for whatever reasons, the engineers and the architects just didn't really flag that with the developer. And when we flagged the question to them, it was just like, oh my God, yes. Like, why wasn't this raised? So they had to completely scrap the whole, the engineering, like the construction, the structural design of that project. they had to revert back to conventional, concrete kind of way, because that just didn't work. It just completely didn't work. If they had pursued that path, what would have happened is you'd have these ugly pipes that are going underneath through these structures, and the headroom wouldn't have met the criteria to get OC. So it was a whole nightmare. Would have saved them, I would say, probably like 100,000 grand of potential variation cost.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'm sure they're glad that you identified it, because although it's painful to know those things at the time, but it's better to know early rather than later. So
Yeah.
that's a great example of how your diverse background and your diverse way of thinking can really support identify any possible, problems or future variations before they even need to happen. So that's really cool. So the next one is like looking at how organized the builder is. So I think if I wanted a builder, I would want them to be pretty organized. My understanding is like you work with these fancy Gantt charts and critical pathways, and so how do you work out if a builder's organized?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Carmen, like you can start off with even just asking them for a preliminary construction program. So a Gantt chart is a good starting point, definitely.
Okay.
Probably some might be surprised that a lot of builders don't use a Gantt chart.
Oh, really?
Definitely, some will still stick to the old tried and true, kind of winging it, calling subbies a couple of days,
Oh
prior.
my God, you're giving me a heart attack.
Yeah. So Gantt chart, definitely. The fact that you brought up a Gantt chart is great. Is great. Definitely start with Gantt chart. Gantt chart should definitely be a prerequisite. But there are little telltale signs that you can tell how well a builder is organized. I mean, just if they've got a ute, a good way to judge is, have a look at the back of the ute. Like, how well organized are their tools? Like, do they have like their tools all neatly packed in grids? That's all neatly stacked, or do they just have like random saws and hammers and just tools and nails and just lying all over the place in the back of the ute? So having those little telltale signs, you can kind of gauge how well organized they are, and also asking questions to them, like in terms of how do they manage their job sites? Do they have some kind of system where they're doing daily logs of sites, like a progress kind of log for what's happening on site on a daily, regular basis? Asking them how they monitor or manage their quality control for the projects. So, because the last thing you want is, like I mentioned, a builder that's just going to be winging it. So, asking those questions up front is really going to help you gauge how well organized that builder is, and you're going to know whether your job's going to be finished on time. Whereas, if they don't have a Gantt chart, chances are the project will probably run well off course.
Yeah, so ask for a Gantt chart, road trip to one of their construction sites and, just stalk them and see what their utes look like and their sites look like. See if there's, mess everywhere and if people are yelling at each other, and just ask questions. I think that's really cool and not something I would have thought about. Like if I was engaging a builder, I wouldn't have thought to say, hey, Darren, where's some of your sites so I can go and, check on your peeps. But I think that sounds, it's such a big investment selecting a builder. I think it sounds like a valid thing to do.
Yeah, because I mean, especially for most homeowners, building their home is probably a once in a lifetime event. So really got to be careful. I mean, while you're comparing, your costings and you're trying to save, which is understandable, the last thing you really want to do is, throw away your life savings and end up with a house that's being built with all these imperfections that you kind of have to live with and see every day. So I always tell people, if you don't have the necessary budget in mind, just save and hold off the construction, because when you get a DA approval for a project in Sydney, you can often wait for about a 5-year window before you really start to construct. So if you don't have the money,
Could you tell me what a DA approval is?
Yeah. So how long it takes, you mean?
No, what is it?
Oh, DA. So I'm talking about development approval, like development application. You're getting
Oh, so the council goes, yeah, you can build that.
That's right.
5-year window.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. For
Okay.
most projects, you have that 5-year window to start construction. Yeah. Before that lapse, and then you have to relodge and
Yeah. So I'm getting up with the lingo. I love it. All right. So the next one is the validity of the builder's license. So I don't even know much about builder's licenses. So tell me what they are. How do I check if it's valid?
Yeah. So I mean, this brings back to like a horror story that we actually came across. Was we actually got approached by a project manager. I put it in this hyphenated form, but So he approached us for this job that they wanted us to quote on, and I did a little bit of digging because his email had some email signature that he's supposedly a master builder member, and I just did a bit of digging, and next thing I knew, it actually turns out that this supposed PM was actually a former ex builder that got his license suspended because he was getting sued by all these people. So you can check a validity of a builder license by simply hopping onto Fair Trading. You can just do a quick search on Google, just builder license check, go on a Fair Trading website, type in the builder's builder license number, and that will give you a history account of how long that license been active, and whether it is still active, which is more important to know than anything.
Yeah.
And another thing to be aware of is, when you're dealing with some of these home construction or townhouses that are involving 4 levels or less, the builder needs to take out something that used to be called the homeowner warranty. It's
Okay.
now known as HBCF, which is Home Building Compensation Fund. And each builder basically has an eligibility in terms of what is the scale of works they can do. So, for example, some builders might only have like a 3 million cap, and that means that they can only work on projects within that 3 million space. Some larger companies will then have bigger cap that can go up to 5 or 8 million or so on.
Okay.
So you have to make sure that the builder you're going to engage actually has that eligibility in place, because if they don't, what that means is they can't take out that home building compensation fund or homeowner warranty for your project. And for any project that's over 20,000, it's legally required that you must take on that HBCF. So
Okay.
if a builder doesn't have the eligibility for that scale of works, and they don't submit to you a proof that they can do that, then you're treading in pretty much illegal territory, and your project's not going to be covered, basically.
My goodness, like I'm having heart attacks. So I'm not even selecting a builder at the moment. I feel like I want to like get everyone and just go listen to Darren. Make sure like you've got it all right. It sounds like it can go really right and it can go really wrong. So I'm glad you're sharing all these things. So the last one you'd like to share with everyone is how well the builder understands the project. So surely, if I gave a builder a project that understand it.
Yeah, well, you see, that you'll be surprised because it really depends on the project, right? But in some cases, there's a really crucial sequencing of how you build the project.
Yeah.
Depending on the site restrictions, there's so many variables that come into play with building construction projects. But to gauge how well the builder really understands the project, you should be asking them in terms of what they have in mind of a build sequence, right? If a builder has a really true grasp of your project, they should be able to tell you what they have in mind in terms of the sequencing of the construction works, how they're going to start, how they're going to finish. Um, because especially for residential home projects, for example, if you're looking to build a backyard swimming pool, that needs to start first. Obviously, there's no point building your beautiful house, but then realizing, oh, wait a minute, I can't bring my excavation machine through to the backyard to start digging the pool. So there has to be a sequencing to these things. And it's important to get a builder that really gets an understanding of what needs to come first, what needs to come second, and the proper sequencing. So when it comes to understanding of the project, it's just important to ask them, how are you looking to, build this project? And you can tell sometimes also by comparing the Gantt charts or the program that builders have submitted to the project.
Yeah. And so, and like I know that you work with a lot of architects as well. So if you've engaged an architect, the architect could help suss out the builder for you too, couldn't they?
Yeah, that's right. We tend to recommend clients, if they don't really have much of understanding of building construction, is to keep the architect on board as the contract admin throughout the construction process, because they can help and assist with that. And it just keeps the builder in track as well, so that you make sure that they're not submitting these progress claim in advance. A perfect example is this just happened literally, I think it was last Friday or last Thursday. We had an inquiry from a client that basically what had happened is he was doing an extension addition project for his home in Bellevue Hill, and he had actually paid the builder out for the entire amount of the building construction contract amount. He's just been paying it forward on good faith that the builder's doing the work. It's now come to the end. He's paid everything. I think it was 600 grand for the contract, and the building is not being completed. There's still things. I think they probably built about 70% there. So he's paid 100% of the amount, but it's only been built about 70%. And that's not even the worst problem. The worst problem is that a lot of the things that were built weren't being built properly.
Yeah.
Things like waterproofing weren't done properly, so there's leakage from the roof. There's a whole lot of things that needs to be rectified. So, but the poor guy, he's paid all of his mortgages, all of the money that he's leased out from the bank. He needs to go back and refinance now. So the last thing you want to do is be in that position, and the way you can prevent that from happening is if you engage an architect, they will cross-check the progress claim. So when a builder says, I'm looking to, withdraw 50% of the works, got the contract amount, they can then go on site, do an inspection, and make sure, of course, that, that actually all checks out.
Yeah. Beautiful. Oh my goodness, like it just gives me heart attacks that this stuff happens not only on television, but actually happens down the road. That's full on. So we've covered a lot today. We advertised, the 3 traps to avoid when selecting a builder, but we couldn't help ourselves, and we ended up with 6. So we've got, understanding the numbers, and if there's variation, you've shared with us the various things that could be the reason for that. One is maybe the builder's not making money. One is the builder might just be wanting you to say yes and then submit all these really costly variations. Another one might be that they don't have a project manager on site, and all those things you should be aware of. You've covered how well the builder treats their subcontractors or not, but does the builder pay their subcontract? Are their subcontractors going to want to do really good work for them, or just do enough to move on to the next job?
That's right.
The company's background, like you said, some of the companies have really narrow backgrounds and some have broader backgrounds, and the background can then also indicate, how likely they are to pick up on any potential problems. How organized the builder is. I just assume that they're all going to have Gantt charts. Apparently not. So make sure that they do have a Gantt chart, that you can see it. Go and stalk them, check out their ute, and see how organized they are. Check the validity of the builder's license and that extra insurance. What was that one called again?
Yeah, the Home Builders Compensation Fund, HBCF. Yeah, used to be called Homeowner Warranty. Yeah.
Test how well the builder understands the project, and this could be around the sequencing. When I think about it, it makes sense to build the pool first, but it's not something I would have thought of. So it's about the sequencing. So there's a whole heap there. And you've shared all sorts of stories. So overall, Darren, if someone's selecting a builder, that's a really big commitment. How do you go about it? Is it do you spend a lot of time talking to them? Is it valid to go and stalk them and check out how tidy their utes are? What should you be doing to select your builder?
I think ultimately it comes down to just picking a builder that you feel comfortable with and you can trust. Because the last thing you want to do is you want to enter this legal contract that's going to involve several thousands or millions of dollars with someone that you don't feel comfortable with. And keeping in mind, most of these building contracts, building projects take well over a year. You don't really want to be working a year with someone that you don't feel comfortable with, and you're always going to be kind of doubting and second guessing everything that they're saying is happening. So I think it's important to really communicate and just speak with the builder. And before you sign a contract, just have a few conversations, not just the one call and say, hey, can you price this up? Give me a price. That's it. End of conversation. But keep the kind of conversation open, talk to them a few times, do a few background checks that we've kind of covered through, whether that's past clients, subbies, or even architects, consultants they've worked with. It's just important to pick someone that you really know and trust, and you understand that they stand for something, that they're going to be ethical and do the right thing by you.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, that was really helpful, Darren, and really enlightening. I learned a whole heap, had a few heart attacks. But I feel that, you know, I'm in a better position, you know, at a time when, you know, I would be selecting a builder. So that was really helpful. So what's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they've got, you know, questions about you as a builder, or maybe they just want to like double check something or suss you out? What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way to contact me is through my email. So that's Darren at Magico Constructions, spelled magic with an O, and then constructions and just .com. That's probably the best way.
All right, beautiful. So Darren's a cool dude. Feel free to ask him any questions, suss him out, you know, do it over a few conversations. And that's great. So Darren, before we go, do you have any final words to share with everyone?
Just stop picking the builder that gives you the lowest quote. I can't stress that enough. The amount of horror stories that we get told and we witness, probably 80% of them stem from them just picking someone that was cheap at the time and then ending
Yeah.
up costing double the amount in the end. So just
Mm,
don't do it. Think
yeah.
rationally. Don't think just based on the cost.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. That's been really amazing. And so cheap isn't necessarily cheap. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right. Thanks for having me, Carmen.
All right, beautiful. Thanks. See you.